All right, let's dive in. Doug Casey, right. The guy's known for, well, let's just say he's got a knack for seeing things differently and, maybe even profiting when the rest of us are kind of freaking out. So we've got a whole bunch of his interviews and articles here, ready to get into it.
Oh, definitely. Casey's not all doom and gloom, though, is he? I mean, he's actually pretty good at finding opportunities even when things look a little shaky, real.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who else is talking to Cape Verde? Beautiful beaches, volcanoes, the whole island vibe, but not exactly an economic powerhouse, right?
No, not really. Casey even says that himself, the lack of resources there is a definite challenge. He actually compares it to places like the Cayman Islands, which, as you know, are more about finance than, say, manufacturing. So could Cape Verde pull off something similar, you think?
Hmm. Interesting point. I mean, it makes you think, right? You got to really get what an economy is built on. You know what I mean? Like, if you're thinking about investing or even moving somewhere, that's crucial.
Absolutely. And Casey really hits on that, especially with a place like Cape Verde. He's all about doing your research, like really getting into it. He even suggests talking to lawyers and real estate agents there, not just for the legal stuff, but to like get a feel for the power dynamics. Sounds like he's saying there's more going on than meets the eye.
Oh, yeah, that's classic, Casey. Always looking for those hidden angles. Speaking of which, his take on interest rates
Oh,
kind of threw me for a loop, I gotta admit. He's predicting a return to those crazy high rates like back in the 80s. And you know who he blames? Governments.
right. Well, I mean, a lot of economists are worried about what's been happening with, well, monetary policy lately, right? The whole printing more money thing can lead to, well, inflation, and then interest rates go up, which means borrowing gets more expensive. It's complicated, but that's the gist.
Yeah, no, I get it. But what does that mean for, like, regular folks? People trying to buy a house or start a business, things could get pretty tough, no?
Yeah. Yeah, potentially, yeah. Casey actually compares predicting interest rates to, get this, guessing Einstein's IQ. He's basically saying it's pretty unpredictable. Even the smartest people can get it wrong.
Good point. But hey, at least knowing these things are out there, these possibilities can help us make better decisions, right?
Definitely. And Casey says if you're worried about all that economic stuff, maybe look at countries that are, well, stable. He really likes Namibia, and Botswana calls them Plan B spots in Africa.
Oh, yeah, he talked about Namibia having all that land, like wide open spaces, and it's actually affordable. But honestly, the whole moving to another continent thing, even if it sounds simpler, it's kind of daunting, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. And I think it's important to remember that, well, Casey's looking at it from a certain perspective, right? There are always two sides to the coin. I mean, what about healthcare or schools? Those can be totally different from what you're used to. Got to do your homework, weigh those pros and cons.
Good advice. Always good advice. Now, how about something a little different? Coffee. Never thought we'd be getting into commodities here, but Casey's take on the coffee world is, well, pretty wild. And maybe a little scary, too.
Yeah. He talks about those Central American coffee farmers, the ones having trouble finding enough workers and just not having the resources to like keep things going. Meanwhile, those East African exporters, they're stepping it up. But it's still those big players, Brazil, Vietnam, who are calling the shots. It's a whole system, this supply and demand thing, that's affecting the price of your morning cup.
And here's where Casey gets really interesting. He's saying, forget investing directly in farms. Too risky. Try futures trading instead.
Right. Now, that might sound complicated, but it's basically a way to like be part of the coffee market without actually owning any beans. It's like you're betting on whether the price will go up or down. If you're right, you win. If you're wrong, well,
Yeah, a bit of a gamble, huh? It's like he's saying, don't just drink it, trade it. Totally different way of looking at things.
for sure. But there are some things Casey's not so optimistic about, and he doesn't hold back either. Like when he talks about Trump's plan for Gaza, he doesn't mince words.
Yeah, criminally insane, he actually says. That's pretty harsh, even for Casey, right?
Well, remember, he's coming at it from like a historical perspective, geopolitics, economics. To him, it's not just impractical, it's just plain wrong. He talks about how much it would cost, moving people, buying land, and the ethical side of it too.
Yeah, and how the whole plan ignores all that history, all those conflicts. He's worried it'll just make things worse. Even brings up examples of forced displacement, which, well, we know how those usually end up.
It's a really sensitive issue, right?
Yeah.
And I think what Casey's saying, even if it's controversial, is that we have to think about the consequences. It's about people's lives, their homes, not just politics and economics.
Absolutely. And then there's his take on the International Criminal Court, the ICC. It's almost like he's got this love-hate thing going on with the whole idea of global justice.
Yeah, he really goes after the U.S. for those sanctions against the ICC. You know, he's saying it's hypocritical to interfere with something you're not even a part of. But he also questions the ICC itself, like, is it really fair? Does it actually work the way it should?
Right. His point is that it seems to target certain countries, the ones that aren't as powerful, and ignores others. Like, justice should be blind, but it's not, is it?
Makes you think, for sure. I mean, is this international law thing really working? Is it actually bringing justice? It's a big question.
Huge. And then we get to maybe the most interesting part of all, and maybe the most, I don't know, unsettling. The U.S., the big dog, losing its grip. The end of, what do they call it? American exceptionalism.
Yeah, that's what he thinks, yeah. He sees a shift happening, a move away from the U.S. running everything. China, Russia, Turkey, they're all stepping up.
Yeah.
He actually says it's inevitable and maybe even a good thing, that it's more sustainable, having different power centers, regions, controlling things.
Whoa, that's a big idea, right? That the U.S. wouldn't be number one anymore. I mean, what happens then? What about all those alliances? The global stuff. How do you even, manage a world with so many different bosses?
That's what we need to be figuring out, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, no one knows for sure, but at least talking about it, thinking about these things, that helps us, get ready. Maybe even change how things go.
Being prepared, right. That's the key. Whether it's spreading your money around or learning a new language or just understanding different cultures and how their governments work, got to be flexible.
Exactly. That's what I'm taking away from all this. It's not just about what Casey's predicting or what stocks to buy, but having the right attitude, being okay with change, wanting to learn, thinking for yourself. That's what matters.
We're training our brains to be stronger, more resilient, ready for whatever comes next. And that's pretty cool, actually.
It is. He's telling us to get involved, get informed, be a better citizen of the world. And who knows, maybe we'll find our own Cape Verde along the way.
Wow, a lot to think about, right? From island getaways to the whole world order changing. It's like Global Studies 101 all crammed into one conversation.
Exactly. And that's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We're not just skimming the surface here. We're really trying to untangle these complicated ideas, connect those dots and see those patterns. It's amazing how it all kind of fits together, right?
Yeah, it really is. I'm already looking at things differently, instead of just reacting to the news, I'm starting to see that bigger picture. Think about the future.
That's exactly what Casey wants us to do. Being proactive, not reactive, right? Really understand what's shaping the world around us. And I think that's a key takeaway here from all of this. Research, being adaptable, and, a healthy dose of skepticism, those are essential these days.
Yeah, he's like that friend who's always saying, don't believe everything you read, but then he actually, backs it up, gives you those arguments, different ways of looking at things. It's kind of refreshing, actually.
Yeah.
Someone challenging all those, mainstream ideas, even if it makes you a little uncomfortable sometimes.
Absolutely. It's so easy to get stuck in those echo chambers, social media, news that's biased, all that. But Casey's saying, hey, step outside of that.
Yeah.
Question what you think you know. Look for different viewpoints. That's how we learn to think for ourselves.
It's like he's giving us permission to trust our own judgment, which can be scary because then you're responsible for what you believe,
Right.
but also empowering because you're not just swallowing whatever they're feeding you.
Right. And that feeling, that empowerment, it's so important, especially when you're making big decisions about your life, your money, even where you want to live. Casey, even when he's being controversial, he's pushing us to engage with the world, ask those tough questions, and find solutions that work for us.
Like he's handing us a map and saying, go explore. No guarantees, but it's your journey. And speaking of journeys, that whole U.S. thing, going from the top dog to just another regional power, wild, right?
It's definitely thought-provoking. And yeah, some people see it as decline, but Casey's saying, hey, maybe it's an opportunity, a chance to create a system that's more balanced, more sustainable. He's imagining a world where, different regions work together, or maybe even compete a little, more diversity, less reliance on just one superpower calling the shots.
So it's okay for the U.S. to share, but then what happens? All those alliances, the global stuff.
Yeah.
How do you even manage a world with, multiple bosses?
Those are the questions, right? The million-dollar questions. And while nobody knows for sure, at least thinking about it, exploring those possibilities, that helps us prepare, maybe even influence how things play out.
Preparation is key, always. Investing wisely, learning new languages, even just understanding different cultures, their politics. Being adaptable, that's what matters.
Couldn't agree more. And that's honestly one of the biggest things I'm taking away from this. It's not just those specific predictions or what to invest in, but about like developing a mindset, one that embraces change, seeks out knowledge and values critical thinking above everything else.
Like we're making our brains more flexible,
Right.
more resilient, so we can thrive no matter what happens. That's pretty exciting, actually.
Absolutely. It's a call to action,
Yeah.
to be more involved, more informed, a better citizen of the world. And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll even find our own little Cape Verde along the way.
It's like, wow, right, a whole new way of looking at things. And, some of this stuff, it can feel kind of heavy. But I gotta say, I'm feeling, I don't know, more hopeful than ever.
Yeah, I get that. It's easy to get caught up in all the uncertainty, right? But knowledge is power. That's what they say. And the more we understand, the better we can, handle whatever comes our way.
So, as we wrap up this whole Doug Casey deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to walk away with? Like that thought that sticks with them?
That's a tough one. But if I had to pick just one, it would be this. Don't just accept things the way they are. Those mainstream ideas, whether it's about investing or global politics, or even just your coffee, dig a little deeper, ask those tough questions, and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, like be your own expert, right?
Yeah.
Your own researcher, your own, what was it, contrarian thinker. Don't be afraid to go against the grain, especially if that's where your own thinking takes you.
Exactly. And that goes for everything,
Yeah.
Checking out investments, figuring out if the news you're reading is legit, develop that critical eye, question authority, and think differently.
So for everyone listening out there, think about this. If you were going to build an investment portfolio for, all this craziness, what would you focus on? After hearing all this from Doug Casey, would you play it safe? Or go for those emerging markets, stick with stuff you can hold, or maybe try those digital currencies?
There's no right answer, right? It's about asking yourself those questions, thinking it through, weighing the risks, and making choices that, well, make sense for you and your goals.
And hey, maybe next time you're having a cup of coffee, you'll think about those farmers, the ones in Central America, or what it means for the world to have all those different power centers. Doug Casey, he's a different kind of thinker, that's for sure. But he definitely gets you thinking about things in a whole new way.
So keep learning, keep asking those questions, and keep digging deeper. There's so much out there, so much to explore.
Well said. Until next time, everyone, stay curious.